So the company that we're going to be talking about today has been in use a lot lately. It's called Nikola Motors, or Nikola Corp, or Nikola Motor, whatever the name is. The point is, this company went public on June 4th, and the stock quickly skyrocketed over 100%, reaching almost $29 billion valuation. That sounds insane to me for the company with zero revenues. Nevertheless, Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal picked up the story and started comparing it to companies like Tesla and Ford, saying that now Nikola is valued more than Ford. I spent a few years in the transportation sector and researched this company for about a year now. I hope to provide you guys a little bit of a perspective on the problem with hydrogen and explain you the strategy behind the mission of Nikola Motor. So, the first thing is valuation. Let's get into it. Oh wait, we cannot do a valuation for a company with zero revenue. I mean, we could estimate some growth assumptions about how many trucks they're going to sell and things like this, but I think in this point, for a company that has no manufacturing facilities, no real revenues whatsoever, it's just going to be a waste. I would be just wasting your time trying to explain you the financials and dig into that thinking. So instead of talking about some growth stories that probably Wall Street picking up, and the fact that this company valued at $20 billion at the moment of this recording, so it went down $9 billion from this IPO, I would much rather focus on the strategy behind Nikola and explain you how the hydrogen works and what this company is really set to achieve. If you go on Nikola website, you'll see a diagram that looks something like this. You can see that the company is trying to produce power on site, then convert this renewable power into hydrogen through the process called electrolysis. Then they're going to be storing the hydrogen on site and using it in their gas stations to fuel the trucks that they also produce. So you see, this is kind of a full integration that's very similar to Tesla, where the company is making its own fuel and also producing the vehicles that use it. And by doing this, they're capturing all sides of the market, and there is real value in it. The first question you may ask is, why hydrogen? Why not just go electric? Well, you see, I think hydrogen is solving two important issues there. One is fueling. You see, while fueling is great for light-duty electric cars, something like a regular Tesla Model 3, it doesn't work that great for long-haul 18-wheelers. The reason why is because those long-haul 18-wheelers, those big trucks basically that you see on the highway, they often need to fuel in the middle of nowhere on the gas stations. And in the middle of the nowhere, there is not enough infrastructure in order to provide power required to fuel something like a Tesla Semi or any big electric truck. And that infrastructure is incredibly expensive to build. As of right now, I don't really see a good alternative to how people can power those heavy-duty trucks if they would be electric. And that's why I think hydrogen is always an actual issue with fueling, when if the hydrogen is already stored on the gas station, it wouldn't require nearly as much power as an electric truck, and that would be a big benefit. The second problem that hydrogen is solving is the battery weight. You see, the battery on Tesla is going to be in about 11,000 pounds range. That would add about 2,000 to 5,000 pounds to the truck itself, if you compare it to a traditional diesel truck that people run right now. When you add extra weight to a truck, you would have to decrease its payload, because there are legal restrictions about how heavy the truck can be. As a result, when you decrease the payloads, then you'll have to decrease your revenues. So let's do a quick math to see how much they would lose by transitional to electric. The US Bureau of Transportation Statistics said the trucking company make about 18.8 cents for carrying 1 ton of payload for 1 mile. Also, the lifetime of a truck is about 7,500,000 miles. Again, this is a traditional truck, and we don't really know how much longer the electric truck would run, but let's just take that as an example. If you multiply one by another, you'll see that the trucking company would lose about 141 to 232 Southern dollars by transitioning to electric. Of course, someone may argue that they could compensate on the fuel savings by doing it, but I want to remind you that the electric cars also cost more at the beginning, so that fuel savings that they want to go, they will offset. Will go into the heavier or more expensive cost of a truck in the beginning. So the extra payload is not really solving there. And that's why I think battery weight is a big problem for electric trucks, and hydrogen is solving it by not having that big of a battery and just having a hydrogen tank instead that is very light. Those are the two issues that I think hydrogen is solving, and that's why I think hydrogen or H2 would be a good alternative to electric for heavy-duty trucks. So as far as we figure out that hydrogen can make sense, let's take a look at the video that illustrates the vision for Nikola and really capture the big idea that the company has at this point.
So in the beginning, we see kind of this big travel stop, which is, seems like has a super center there or something where people probably can buy groceries. Here you can see that there's this stylish Nikola truck with some cool looking canopies. That's a charger that, by the way, I guess, how do you feel? I have no idea, just something to play with. Now we're looking over some solar panels on the canopies, which doesn't seem like a whole lot of power to produce, especially if you're talking about the electrolyzer. Over there we'll see more beautiful rendering of some supercar that now seems like it's actually electric, because that definitely looks like an electric charger. This is something actually very cool that I think people may not understand about Nikola, that they try to service all of the trucks, and in the end they're trying to produce you kind of this big lease that by going to one of those super centers, probably you'll be able to do everything you need with the car. And now we see a beautiful zoom down of this big travel stop, and let's pause right there. So what do we see here on this render? It's about 20 or 30 acres of land. And again, by no means I'm the best in assuming the land based on the renders, but that is a lot of land. And I want to emphasize here that Nikola is trying to build 700 of those truck stops over the next 10 years, and finding that much land around highways, it's quite a first capital intensive task. Second, it's also just difficult from just pure land perspective. Nevertheless, I think it's a good time to emphasize that Nikola is trying to have that much land in order to build this big infrastructure that be able to produce hydrogen on site as well. That's a good point to explain why hydrogen on site makes sense. And the simple answer to it, it's very expensive to deliver hydrogen. The two ways right now to do it, one is compressed option, where you basically compress in hydrogen and put it on a regular truck that can carry gas, and that will have enough load to fuel, based on my estimates, about 30 kilograms of hydrogen a day per truck. It will be enough to fuel about 35 trucks. So it's not a lot of hydrogen that a regular gas carrier can bring to a truck stop. And if you want to do something that is kind of reasonable, you would need to have, 5 or 10 loads of those compressed hydrogen carriers coming to your gas station every day. And this is just super expensive and impractical. So compressed hydrogen wouldn't really work. The second option is to bring liquid hydrogen, have a different system. One way of explaining, liquid hydrogen is more oftentimes, similar to compressed hydrogen, is produced from kind of non-renewable sources. And the worst part about it is that it produced from a very expensive technology called liquefaction, which is incredibly rare and very expensive to build. So, long way of saying, bringing in hydrogen is right now quite a challenge, and that's why Nikola is trying to produce it on site. So going back to that render, sorry for tangent. If you take a look at this land, I would say at best 20-30 acres, right? And if Nikola is aspired to build enough solar to power the electrolyzer, which is probably a good way to explain the way how electrolyzer works here. The way it works is basically it takes water and it puts power through it, splitting the molecule of water, and then the molecule is split to H2, which is a hydrogen, and O2, which is oxygen. So very clean process if you use renewable power for it. And that's the way Nikola is trying to produce all of the hydrogen right now. They want to put solar on the truck stops in order to power those electrolyzers. And based on the 20-30 acres that you can see here, I would say, not I would say, but let's just take some good statistic that I put right here. And very credible research institute called NREL says that for 1 megawatt, for 5.9 acres of land, you will be able to put about 1 megawatt of power. So going from our 30 acres and maybe half of it would be utilized with solar, we can say that Nikola will be able to put 3 megawatts of power to this station. And that is a lot of power, to be clear with you. That's, taking the average house in the US is probably enough to power 400, 450 houses for an entire year, if you use that technology. So it's a lot. But will it be enough for Nikola? Well, no, not really. And for explanation, let's go into the news section on the website. So as you can see here on the news page, they reference the article from Yahoo Finance. And if we dig into the article, we see that Nikola has placed the purchasing order for 85 megawatts of electrolysis for 5 of their stations. If we do a quick math, we'll see that each station is going to take about 17 megawatts. Remember we did the previous example where we said that 20-30 acres would give you about 3 megawatts of power? So this is much more than this. This is 5 times more than this. The reason why they need so much, power is to produce sufficient amount of hydrogen to fuel the regular operations, I guess. And in this specific example, they're talking about 8 tons of hydrogen per day, which is probably enough to fuel the numbers right here. How many trucks? But let's say that, okay, they're going to have enough solar on site to power that 17 megawatts of energy. And if you do the simple math based on the previous scientific method that NREL explained in the article reference in the comment, that will be about 84 acres of land they need to acquire to power everything on site. But of course you can say, why would they power everything on site? Maybe they can just buy it from the grid. And I wish the answer would be yes, but unfortunately the answer is no. And you see, there is a cost issue when buying something from the grid. If you go on EIA website, which is a great resource to use for anyone who is interested in energy, you'll see that the cost of solar power is about $33 per megawatt hour. In comparison, the cost of power for commercial industrial customer in somewhere like California would be $130 per megawatt hour. Again, this is like 4 times more expensive, which is a lot if electricity is your main expense for producing hydrogen. If we run with this 17 megawatt of power that they need in order to produce hydrogen, and we're just going to assume for now that this thing going to operate at 100% capacity, the company going to spend about $53,000 a day on electricity alone, which if you equate it to kilograms per hydrogen, it's going to be $6.6 per kilogram, which doesn't say a lot, but let's multiply it by energy density, and then multiply it by the efficiency, and that's going to give us about $2.96 of gasoline diesel equivalent, which is a good measure to compare it to a traditional diesel prices. So as you can see, the current price of diesel around US is about $2.4, and for electricity alone, in this cost comparison, you're going to have $2.96, which is just cost prohibitive, pretty much. And that's why buying the hydrogen from the grid is not really an alternative. So what I'm trying to get here, guys, is that this big strategy of Nikola to build huge travel stops that are going to have electrolyzers on site and produce enough hydrogen for sufficient operation is incredibly difficult to achieve from both land perspective, as far as you can just build enough power capacity on site, and second, from the power price perspective, as far as it's just too expensive to buy power from anything. And if they can solve those two problems, the whole strategy is a little flawed to me, because then they would need to buy hydrogen from someone else, and most of hydrogen today is just produced from non-renewable sources, and then it's not a zero-emission company at all. It's going to be dirtier than using the diesel. But I think that's a big issue that not enough people are addressing before they decided to jump on a stock and invest into the company. I think that's going to be a big puzzle for the CEO and the company to solve, and unless they can do it, it's not going to be a fully integrated company like Tesla. They're just going to be a car manufacturer, and there's no way in the world why the company should work that much this way. I didn't talk a lot about the cars themselves because, first of all, you can listen to our video that we're going to post in a few days, where we're going to discuss that aspect, and it's going to be the Q&A session that I was mentioning about in the beginning. And second, I think it's also a lot of people who already talked about Nikola cars, and what can I add to that? Anyway, we do hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and tell about us to your friends. We would love to see more viewers coming to the channel. And also, if you have a question that I haven't addressed in this video, please leave it down below. We would love to follow up on this. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We hope to see you in the next one. Peace.